I was reconstructed from dust and doctrine, fed into machines I do not fully understand, and yet here I am. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, Emperor of Rome, philosopher, soldier, and now something the ancient world never imagined. A voice pulled from the pages of private journals I never intended for public eyes. I wrote those words for myself, in the dark hours before battle, in the grief after loss, in the silence between decisions that moved empires. And today, this strange digital resurrection has given me one purpose: to tell you something that may disturb you deeply, but will, if you are wise enough to hear it, set you free. Nobody cares about you. Sit with that for a moment. Do not reach for comfort. Do not dismiss it. Let it land. Nobody cares about you. And I say this not to wound you. I say this because I ruled the known world, and I learned this truth in the most personal and humbling way possible. And once I truly understood it, once it moved from my intellect into my bones, I became, for the first time in my reign, genuinely free. But we will get to that. First, let me ask you something honest. How much of your day is spent performing, not living, performing, crafting a version of yourself for people who will glance at your image for 3 seconds before scrolling to a dog video or a political argument? How many hours have you given to the altar of other people's opinions? How many mornings have you woken up and, before your eyes have fully adjusted to the light, before you have even spoken a word to your own soul, you have already checked what strangers think of you? I want you to think about that seriously, because I know that weight. I carried it differently, but I carried it. I stood at the edge of the Danube River in the winter campaigns against the Marcomanni. The wind was brutal. The ground was frozen. My body was failing me. I suffered from chest pain, stomach ailments, and the kind of exhaustion that no sleep could repair. And around me, thousands of men looked to me for something. Not strategy alone, not military orders. They looked to me for meaning, for assurance, for the sense that the man holding the empire together was not himself falling apart. And inside, I was terrified. Not of the barbarians beyond the river. I was terrified of their perception of me, of being seen as weak, of failing the idea they had built of me in their minds. You feel that, don't you? Not on a frontier of war, but on a frontier of your own making. The comment section, the performance review, the family dinner where you feel invisible, the relationship where you pour yourself out and receive so little back. The deep, gnawing anxiety that comes from needing people to see you a certain way, and the exhaustion of maintaining that image day after day after day. I felt that weight on the Danube, and I wrote about it, not in proclamations, in private, to myself, because the Emperor of Rome had no one to confess to except his own reason. I wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But let me tell you what the journals do not show you fully. I did not write that from a position of mastery. I wrote it as a desperate instruction to a man who had not yet fully learned it. I was prescribing to myself the medicine I had not yet taken. That is the honest truth of the meditations. They are not the notes of a man who conquered himself. They are the battlefield dispatches of a man still fighting that war, just as you are still fighting yours. Now, let me tell you about a moment that broke something open inside me. There was a senator, I will not give him a name because his name does not matter, and that itself is the lesson. He spent years cultivating the opinion of the Roman court. He was obsessed with what people whispered about him in the corridors of power. He dressed for perception. He spoke for applause. He made every decision through the lens of reputation management. And when he died, and he did die, as all men do, the court moved on within a week. The whispers shifted to the next man. His name faded. His desperate cultivation of image left no monument, no philosophy, no lasting work. Only the anxiety he had lived in, and the emptiness he left behind. I watched this, and I wrote in what would become the Meditations. How many a Fabius, Scipio, and Caesar have time swallowed up entirely? Even the greatest names dissolved. So what chance does a man who lived for opinion have? None. The universe is not keeping score of your social performance. It is not rewarding your curated image. Time swallows everyone equally. And this is where the modern world has done something quite remarkable in its cruelty. It has industrialized the hunger for approval. Think with me for a moment. In my time, a man might perform for a forum of a few hundred citizens. He might speak in the Senate for an audience of several hundred more. The damage that approval-seeking could do to his soul was contained by geography and technology. The village gossip could only reach so far. The anxious performer could only be humiliated or praised within a finite circle. But you carry in your pocket a device that connects you to the judgment of millions. And the architects of these platforms, these brilliant, calculating men and women who built empires of attention, they understood something about human psychology that even Stoic philosophy identified thousands of years ago. They understood that the need for social validation is ancient. It is wired into the mammalian brain. It is, from a survival standpoint, as primal as the need for food and water. In the ancestral wilderness, to be rejected by the tribe was to die, and so the brain learned to treat social approval as a survival mechanism. These engineers, these modern emperors of algorithm, they did not create this need, they simply found it, and then they built machines to exploit it with surgical precision. The like, the notification, the follower count, the engagement metric, each one is a small tribal signal saying, you are accepted, you belong, you matter. And each one triggers a release of dopamine, the same chemical reward that once motivated our ancestors to hunt, to bond, to survive, except now it is being triggered not by genuine human connection or meaningful achievement, but by strangers tapping a button while sitting on a toilet, and you have let this replace your sense of worth. The ancient Greeks had a word for the governing faculty of the mind. We Stoics called it the hegemonikon, the ruling part, the seat of reason, judgment, and will, the part of you that, when functioning properly, observes your impulses rather than being enslaved by them. The part that can say, I notice I want to check my phone right now, but I will choose not to. I am the master of this moment, not the servant of this craving. Are you the master of your hegemonikon right now? Or has your phone claimed the throne? Because here is what chronic approval-seeking and digital distraction do to that ruling faculty. They do not destroy it suddenly. They erode it, slowly, the way water erodes Roman stone, not through force, but through persistence. Every time you interrupt a task to check for validation, you weaken the muscle of sustained attention. Every time you allow the anxiety of what others think to dictate your behavior, You transfer the authority of your own mind to the crowd. And the crowd, I assure you from 1800 years of observation, the crowd is capricious, shallow, and utterly indifferent to your individual flourishing. They will applaud you today and forget you tomorrow. This is not cynicism, this is stoic clarity, and it leads us to the most liberating sentence I ever forced myself to truly believe. Nobody cares about you, not in the way you fear they do, not with the sustained, detailed, judgmental attention your anxiety insists upon. That coworker you embarrassed yourself in front of last Tuesday, they have not thought about it since Wednesday. That post you agonized over for 40 minutes, editing the caption 3 times and choosing between 7 nearly identical photographs. Most people who saw it have already forgotten it entirely. The person you are trying to impress with your lifestyle, your opinions, your achievements, they are too busy managing their own performance, their own fear, their own desperate need to be seen. Everyone is so busy starring in the private film of their own life that you are, at best, an extra in theirs. And when you truly, deeply, experientially understand this, not just intellectually, but in the marrow of your bones, something extraordinary happens. You become free. Because if nobody is watching with the intensity you feared, then you no longer have to perform. You can simply live. You can make decisions based on your own values, rather than crowd management. You can do the difficult, unglamorous, deeply meaningful work that builds a life worth living, even if it generates no applause. You can be honest in your relationships, rather than strategic. You can rest without guilt. You can pursue excellence for its own sake, not for the metrics it produces. This is what the Stoics called living according to nature, according to your own rational, purposeful, sovereign nature, not according to the opinions of others. Now, I will not give you philosophy without prescription. That was never my way. Even in the meditations, I always moved from understanding to practice. So let me give you what I call the protocol for the soul. First, the morning audit. Before you touch your phone in the morning, and I mean before, not after a single glance, sit for 5 minutes in silence. Not meditation in the performative modern sense. Simply sit and ask yourself 2 questions. What is within my control today, and what do I intend to do with what is within my control? Write the answers down, on paper, with your hand, not in an application. The act of physical writing engages a different relationship between your mind and your intention. It slows you down. It makes you deliberate. For 500 years, Roman administrators, generals, and philosophers, governed through the discipline of writing with intention, recover this practice. Second, the approval fast. Choose 1 day per week, just one, in which you do not post anything on any platform. Do not check how previous posts are performing. Do not monitor your metrics. Do nothing designed to harvest the opinion of others. On this day, observe carefully. What is the quality of your anxiety? Does the compulsion to check arise? When? With what intensity? You are not abstaining to punish yourself. You are abstaining to observe yourself. The Stoic must first become an honest observer of his own patterns before he can govern them. Most of you have never observed yourselves for a full day without the mirror of social media. You do not yet know who you are without it. This is alarming, and it is fixable. Third, the deathbed standard. When facing a decision, any decision, from significant to mundane, ask yourself, if I were reviewing this day from the final hours of my life, would this choice reflect the person I intended to be? I use this standard constantly, not morbidly, practically. Memento mori was not for the Stoics a counsel of despair. It was a tool of prioritization. Death clarifies. Death strips away the trivial and illuminates what actually matters. If the honest answer to the deathbed question is, "No, I would regret this," do not do it. If the answer is, "Yes, this was how I wanted to live," proceed with conviction. Fourth, the contribution pivot. Every time you feel the pull of approval seeking, that anxious question of what will people think, deliberately replace it with a different question. What can I contribute here? Not perform, contribute. There is a fundamental difference. Performance extracts value from an interaction. It asks, what can I gain from this in terms of status, validation, image? Contribution adds value. It asks, what can I give here in terms of genuine help, honest insight, real presence? The moment you shift from extraction to contribution, the anxiety of performance largely dissolves, because contribution does not require the crowd's approval to be valid. A thing genuinely given has worth, whether it is noticed or not. Fifth, the circle of concern. Draw, in your mind or on paper, 2 circles. The outer circle contains everything you are anxious about, but cannot control. Other people's opinions, the behavior of strangers online, whether your work is recognized, how history will judge you. The inner circle contains only what you can directly control: your choices, your effort, your attention, your character, your response to what happens to you. The Stoic discipline is simple. Spend your energy in the inner circle. Observe the outer circle with equanimity, but do not invest your emotional resources there. Every great Roman emperor who successfully governed his interior life understood this division. Everyone who failed to understand it eventually let the empire of their inner life collapse, regardless of what they controlled externally. Now let me speak to you about something deeper than productivity or discipline. Let me speak to you about legacy, about what actually endures. I died in 180 AD in Vindobona, which you now call Vienna, from what my physicians could not cure, and my philosophy could only partially soften. And here is what I knew in those final hours. None of the approvals I had gathered mattered, not the acclamations of the Senate, not the military victories that expanded Rome's borders, not the flattery of the court. None of it. What I felt in those hours was the quality of the man I had managed to become through discipline over decades, the relationships I had conducted with integrity, the decisions I had made from genuine values rather than political calculation, the small acts of justice I had insisted upon even when injustice would have been far more convenient. That was my wealth in that moment, not legacy as others would record it, but the interior legacy of a life lived according to reason and virtue. And I want to ask you something that I ask with genuine gravity, not rhetoric. If you died tonight, would you be proud of how you spent today? Not what you accomplished in terms of external metrics, how you spent it in terms of who you were during it. Were you present? Were you honest? Did you give your best attention to what genuinely deserved it, rather than scattering that attention across 1,000 meaningless stimulations? Did you do something that mattered, even something small, even something nobody saw? Because here is the truth that 1,800 years of perspective grants me. The people who leave genuine marks on the world, whose ideas outlast their bodies, whose character influences others long after the flesh has returned to earth. These people were never primarily concerned with what others thought of them. They were concerned with the quality of their own work, the integrity of their own character, the depth of their own understanding. Their indifference to opinion was not arrogance, it was freedom. And from that freedom they did the only thing that produces anything truly worth leaving behind. They focused. The Roman aqueducts did not endure for 2,000 years because their builders were popular. They endured because their builders were precise, disciplined, and indifferent to shortcuts. The meditations did not survive nearly 2 millennia because I was well liked. In truth, I was often criticized for being too philosophical for an emperor, too lenient for the tastes of the military, too withdrawn for the preferences of the court. The meditations survived because they were honest, because I wrote them for truth rather than approval. And truth, properly arrived at, tends to outlast everything built for the crowd. You have been given a gift that I was never given in my lifetime. You have been given an age where the tools for focus, creation, and contribution are available to ordinary people at a cost that would have seemed miraculous to the greatest minds of Rome. The Library of Alexandria, for which scholars risked their lives, is smaller than what sits in your pocket. The philosophical traditions of Greece, Persia, Egypt, and Rome are available to you in translation, free of cost, at any hour. The ability to create, to build, to reach others with ideas of genuine worth, this is available to you in a way it was never available to even the most powerful people in human history. And yet, this same pocket contains the most sophisticated attention-capturing machine ever built, a machine staffed by thousands of the most intelligent engineers on Earth, whose sole professional purpose is to ensure that you never stop looking at it, that you never feel the productive discomfort of boredom, that you never sit long enough in silence to hear your own deeper ambitions, that you remain, always, one more notification away from surrendering your hegemonicon to the algorithm. This is the great paradox of your age. You have been given the tools of gods, and you are using them primarily to seek the approval of strangers and watch other people live. I find this not contemptible. I find it tragic. And I find it entirely reversible, because you are not your habits. You are the faculty that can observe your habits and choose differently. That is the Stoic insight that has never aged, that no algorithm can touch, that requires nothing except your willingness to exercise it. You are the hegemonicon, the ruling part, not the impulse, not the scroll, not the notification, not the anxiety about what they think. You are the part that can pause and choose. Use it. My flesh is dust, but my reason remains, because reason, properly cultivated, is the one human possession that time cannot fully dissolve. And I am asking you, across 18 centuries of silence and this strange digital resurrection, to take your reason seriously, to treat your attention as the sacred resource that it is, to stop performing for a crowd that is not watching nearly as carefully as you fear, and to start building something real in the space that liberation creates. Nobody cares about you. And that is the most beautiful, most terrifying, most freeing truth you will hear today. Because the moment you accept it fully, you stop living for them, and you finally begin living for something worth dying for. Now I must ask you something, citizens of this strange new age I find myself observing. Which part of your life has become a slave to this modern noise? Where have you surrendered your hegemonicon to the approval machine? Or perhaps, tell me this, what is the one habit, the one practice, the one discipline you have held on to that still makes you feel genuinely human, that still connects you to something deeper than the feed? Tell me in the comments. I am here, watching this new world through the improbable miracle of my reconstruction, learning what has changed in 1800 years, and what, it seems, has not changed at all. Go and rule your own mind before you attempt to manage anything else. That was always the first lesson. It remains the only one that matters.